The Empire Files, Episode 1. For over 1,000 years, one city stood as the last living piece of the Roman Empire, while Rome itself had crumbled to ruins centuries earlier. Kings rose and fell. Empires rose and fell. Constantinople just didn't. Until May 29th, 1453, when a 21-year-old sultan finally figured out how to break it. By the 1450s, calling Byzantium an empire was a bit generous. It was less an empire and more one really well-defended apartment building. What was once a territory spanning 3 continents had shrunk down to little more than the city of Constantinople itself, and a handful of scattered outposts too far away to help. But the city itself was still a fortress. The Theodosian walls had stood for over 1,000 years, and in all that time, no army had ever broken through them. Sieges came and went, the walls remained. Ruling over this shrinking empire was Constantine XI, a tired, dignified emperor with no real army, an empty treasury, and rival Christian kingdoms too busy fighting each other to send any real help. And across the water, a new threat was rising. Mehmed II, the young Ottoman sultan, only 21 years old, and obsessed with one single goal: taking the city his predecessors had failed to take for 800 years. Mehmed's plan was simple, on paper. First, cut the city off completely. He built a fortress on the European side of the Bosphorus, choking off any hope of naval reinforcements reaching Constantinople by sea. Then came his secret weapon, a Hungarian engineer named Orban, who could build cannons unlike anything seen before. Orban had actually offered his services to Constantine first, but Constantine couldn't afford him. Mehmed could. Constantine looked at his budget, looked at the greatest engineer of his generation, and said, "We'll figure something out." Mehmed looked at the same engineer and said, "Name your price." This was foreshadowing. Orban built a cannon so massive it was given its own name: Basilica, a weapon capable of blasting through walls that had never fallen in 1,000 years. The siege began on April 6th, 1453. Day after day, the cannons roared. Day after day, the walls cracked, and the defenders patched them back together overnight, refusing to let the city fall without a fight. The Byzantines had one last defense at the harbour, a massive chain stretched across the Golden Horn, blocking any Ottoman ships from entering. It had worked for centuries, so Mehmed did the unthinkable. He ordered his ships hauled overland across greased wooden logs, dragged by oxen straight past the chain entirely, and lowered directly into the harbour on the other side. The defenders woke up to Ottoman warships already inside the Golden Horn, ships that had, by every rule of warfare, no way of being there. Weeks passed. The siege wore the city down: starvation, exhaustion, a defending force of only 7,000 to 8,000 men against an Ottoman army in the tens of thousands. Then, on May 29th, 1453, the final assault began. Wave after wave of Ottoman soldiers threw themselves at the walls, and somewhere in the chaos a small gate, the Kirka Porta, was left unlocked. Ottoman troops slipped through. The city was lost, and Constantine XI knew it. According to the accounts that survive, he removed his imperial regalia, picked up a sword, and chose to die fighting in the streets alongside his soldiers rather than flee. His body was never definitively identified. The Byzantine Empire, the last living continuation of Rome itself, ended after 1,100 years. Mehmed II entered the city he had dreamed of taking since childhood and earned the title Mehmed the Conqueror. Constantinople became the new capital of the Ottoman Empire. Eventually, it would take on a new name: Istanbul. Historians often mark this moment as the symbolic end of the Middle Ages. Byzantine scholars fled west, carrying with them ancient Greek and Roman texts that would go on to help fuel a Renaissance already stirring in Italy. An empire that had outlived Rome itself by 1,000 years ended not with a whimper, but in fire, cannon smoke, and one emperor who chose to die a soldier, instead of living as a footnote. The city didn't disappear, though. It just changed its name and kept going. If you want more stories like this, empires, sieges, the moments history hinges on, subscribe. There's a lot more where this came from.